Imagine this. What if you could teach a language with no textbook, no fancy tech, and no pre-planned materials at all? Well, that's the core idea behind Dogme ELT, a philosophy that's often called teaching unplugged. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll dig into what Dogme is and its pretty surprising backstory. Then, we'll look at the three main ideas that make it tick, see what it actually looks like in a classroom, and wrap up with a fair look at both the good and the not so good. Okay, first things first. Let's get right to the heart of what Dogme ELT is all about and where it came from, which, believe it or not, is the world of movies. At its core, Dogme is really just a return to the basics. It's all about stripping away the fluff and focusing on the most powerful things you have in any classroom: the teacher, the students, and the real conversation that happens between them. It's a belief that genuine human connection is worth way more than any pre-made worksheet. The origin story here is pretty fascinating because it didn't start in a university, it started in a movie theater. Back in 1995, you had the Dogme 95 film movement, which said no to special effects and big budgets in favor of raw, authentic storytelling. 5 years later, an educator named Scott Thornbury had a light bulb moment. He saw a parallel in teaching and called for a rescue action to save language classes from being buried under technology and textbooks and to bring them back to that fundamental teacher-student conversation. So, how does this philosophy really work? Well, it's all built on three fundamental pillars. These are the ideas that define the entire approach. Okay, Dogme really stands on three legs, and you need all three for it to work. It's conversation-driven, it's materials-light, and it focuses on what we call emergent language. You see how they're all connected, right? You can't have a truly conversation-driven class if you're chained to a textbook, and it's that very conversation that allows real, authentic language to just emerge. Let's break them down. First up, the entire lesson is powered by talk, not by a pre-written script. The teacher's main job is to get a real discussion going and then just listen. When a student tries to say something but can't quite find the words, the teacher steps in with just the right amount of help, a technique called scaffolding, to help them build on what they know and get their idea out. Second, the approach is materials light. Now, this doesn't mean you can't ever use materials. It just means you're ditching the pre-packaged course books. Instead, the content of the lesson comes straight from the students themselves. Their lives, their opinions, their questions. And because of that, every lesson is automatically personal and relevant. And finally, maybe the coolest part, Dogme focuses on emergent language. This means the teacher doesn't walk in and say, okay, today we're learning the past tense. No. Instead, they listen for that moment when a student tries to use the past tense and maybe gets it wrong. That mistake isn't a problem. It's a magic moment. It's the perfect, natural opportunity to teach the exact language that student needs right then and there. Okay, theory's great, but let's get practical. Let's see how all this actually builds into a lesson. What does teaching unplugged really look and feel like? Right, so a Dogme lesson never starts with, okay, everyone, open your books to page 42. It's much more likely to start with the teacher just asking, so, how was everyone's weekend? The goal is just to create a space where a real chat can happen. The teacher's skill then comes from listening, guiding, and shaping the language that pops up naturally. Here's a perfect little example. A teacher asks a simple, genuine question about the weekend. The student, Francesc, says, I study. Now, instead of just correcting him, a Dogme teacher gently reshapes the answer. Ah, you're going to study? What are you going to study? And just like that, they've taught a grammar point in a way that's immediate, totally necessary, and feels completely natural. So you see this natural cycle, right? The teacher starts a real conversation, listens really carefully to what the student is trying to say, and then offers that little bit of support to help them say it more accurately. That grammar point, using going to for future plans, wasn't on a syllabus for Tuesday. It just emerged from a real need to communicate. The lesson is literally being created right there in the moment. But of course, let's be real. No single approach is a magic bullet for every situation. Dogme has created a ton of excitement, but it's also attracted some very valid criticisms. The upsides are huge, for sure. Dogme is super learner-centered, it builds a great sense of community in the classroom, and the learning really sticks because it's tied to personal experience. But on the flip side, the criticisms are practical ones. How do you manage this in a class of 30 students? Does it require a kind of spontaneous language skill that might be tough for some non-native speaker teachers? And for some students, the lack of a clear syllabus can feel a bit aimless, even chaotic. And this all leads us to the big question for any teacher, really. Is Dogme a complete revolution, something that should totally replace the old ways? Or is it better to think of it as a powerful mindset, a way of being ready to jump on those magic moments of learning whenever they show up, even if you're working within a more structured course? Maybe the real magic isn't about choosing one or the other, but in learning how to beautifully blend them both.